Hey everybody, it's Mr. Marshall here at Stony Lane. We are continuing our summer read aloud of The 100 Dresses. We are getting near the end, right? We're getting near the end. So we are thinking about the relationship between these different characters, between Peggy and Maddie. We're thinking about Wanda. We're thinking about the issue of fitting in. And so we're going to keep going now, right? So we're thinking about how we're feeling bad about the way that Wanda is being teased and she's not fitting in, right? Because of all these things that are beyond her control, we're learning that wanting to fit in can make you do bad things. We see that with with Maddie, right? Because she doesn't want to get teased by Peggy, sorry. And so she's also being part of the problem. She's teasing. Okay, so we're going to read chapter 6 right now. It says, Up on Boggin's Heights. Ready? The two girls hurried out of the building, up the street toward Boggin's Heights, the part of town that wore such a forbidding air on this kind of November afternoon, drizzly, damp, and dismal. Well, at least, Peggy said gruffly, I never did call her a foreigner or make fun of her name. I never thought she had the sense to know that we were making fun of her anyway. I thought she was too dumb. Well, that's nice, right? She's like, Peggy's acting like she's being like all nice now, but she's not. She's not. She's still being mean. And look at how she can draw. I thought I could draw. Maddie could say nothing. All she hoped was that they would find Wanda just so she'd be able to tell her they were sorry at all that they had picked on her. And just to say how wonderful the whole school thought she was, and please not to move away, and everybody would be so nice. She and Peggy would fight anybody who was not nice. That's nice that she's thinking that, but it's kind of too late. Is it too late? Can she change? Can Maddie change? Sometimes people can, like in the long run, but it might be too late for the situation with Wanda, right? Let's keep going. Maddie fell to imagining a story in which she and Peggy assailed any bully who might be going to pick on Wanda. Petronsky, Ansky, somebody would yell, and she and Peggy would pounce on the guilty one. For a time, Maddie consoled herself with these thoughts. But they soon vanished, and again she felt unhappy and wished that everything could be nice the way it was before any of them had made fun of Wanda. Or how drab and cold and cheerless it was up here on the heights. In the summertime in the woods, the sumac and the ferns that grew along the brook on the side of the road were lush and made this a beautiful walk on Sunday afternoons, but now it didn't seem so beautiful. The brook had shrunk to the merest trickle, and today's drizzle sharpened the outlines of the rusty tin cans, all old shoes, and forlorn remnants of a big black umbrella in the bed of the brook. The two girls hurried on. They hoped to get to the top of the hill before dark. Otherwise, they were not certain that they would find Wanda's house. At last, puffing and panting, they rounded to the top of the hill, to the house, the old rickety one that belonged to Old Man Svensson. Look at that. Peggy and Maddie hurried past it, almost on tiptoe. Somebody once said that Old Man Svensson had shot a man. Others said, nonsense, he's an old good-for-nothing. He wouldn't hurt a flea. But true or false, the girls breathed more freely as they rounded the corner. It was too cold and drizzly for Old Man Svensson to be in his customary chair tilted against the house, chewing, and even his dog was nowhere in sight and had not barked at the girls from wherever he might be. I think that's where the Petronskys live, said Maddie, pointing to a little white house with lots of chicken coops at the side of it. Wisps of old grass stuck up here and there along the pathway like thin wet kittens, and the house and its sparse little yard looked shabby but clean. It reminded Maddie of Wanda's one dress, her faded blue cotton dress, shabby but clean. There was not a sign of life about the house except for a yellow cat, half-grown, crouching on the one small step close to the front door. It leapt timidly, with a small cry, halfway up the tree when the girls came into the yard. Peggy knocked firmly on the door. and there was no answer. She and Maddie went around to the backyard and knocked there. Still there was no answer. "Wanda!" called Peggy. They listened sharply, but only a deep silence pressed against their eardrums. There was no doubt about it. The Petronskis were gone. "Maybe they just went away for a little while, and they haven't really left with their furniture yet," suggested Maddie hopefully. Maddie was beginning to wonder how she could bear the hard fact that Wanda had actually gone and that she might never be able to make amends. Right? It sounds like Maddie's having a lot of feelings about this. It sounds like she's changing, right? Doesn't it sound like it? Well, that's one of the things we think about at the end of a book. How are characters changing and growing? Do you see how Maddie's changed a lot from the beginning? In the beginning, she really worried. She was worried about being made fun of, and so she did mean things. But it sounds like she's learning, right? It sounds like she's learned that that was wrong, right? So I want to teach you a word, right? It's a really grown-up word. It's a word that scientists use, and it's a word that means something that changes something else, right? It makes something change, and that's called a catalyst, right? Catalyst. And that happens in books too, right? Sometimes characters change, and it's because of something, right? Do you think you know what the catalyst in Maddie's change is? Do you see Maddie changing? Let's see. What's the reason for her change? "Well," Peggy said, "let's see if the door is open." They cautiously turned the knob of the front door. It opened easily, for it was a light thing and looked as though it furnished but frail protection against the cold winds that blew up here in the wintertime. The little square room that the door opened into was empty. There was absolutely nothing left in it. Can you imagine that? There's one tiny room, and it's empty. In the corner, a closet, there was a door wide open, and it was empty too. They're gone, right? Maddie wondered what it had held before the Petronskis moved out, and she thought of Wanda saying, "Sure, 100 dresses, all lined up in a closet." Why did she say that? She was too embarrassed, right? Well, anyway, real and imaginary dresses alike were gone. The Petronskis were gone. And how could she and Peggy tell Wanda anything? Maybe the teacher knew where she moved. Maybe old man Svensson knew. They might knock on his door and ask on the way down. Or the post office might know. If they wrote a letter, Wanda might get it because the post office might forward it. Feeling very downcast and discouraged, the girls closed the door and started for home, coming down the road way, way off in the distance, through the drizzle that they could see the water of the bay, gray and cold. "Do you suppose that was their cat and they forgot her?" asked Peggy. But the cat wasn't anywhere around now as the girls turned the bend and they saw her crouching under the dilapidated wooden chair in front of old man Svensson's house. So perhaps the cat belonged to him. They lost their courage about knocking on his door and asking where the Petronskis had left. And anyway, goodness, here was old man Svensson himself coming up the road. Everything about Svensson was yellow. His house, his cat, his trousers, his drooping mustache and his tangled hair, his hound loping behind him, and the long streams of tobacco juice he expertly shot from between his scattered yellow teeth. Ew. The two girls drew over to the side of the path as they hurried by. When they were a good way past, they stopped. "Hey, Mr. Svensson," yelled Peggy. "When did the Petronskis move?" Old man Svensson turned around, but he said nothing. Finally, he did answer, but his words were unintelligible. That meant that they couldn't understand it. And the two girls turned and ran down the hill as fast as they could. Old man Svensson looked after them for a moment, and then went up on the hill, muttering to himself and scratching his head. When they were back down on Oliver Street again, the girls stopped running. They felt disconsolate. Look at that picture. How must they have felt? Maddie wondered if she were going to be unhappy about Wanda and the 100 dresses forever. Nothing would ever seem good to her again, because just when she was about to enjoy something, like going for a hike with Peggy, to look for bayberries or sliding down Barley Hill, she would bump right smack into the thought that she had that she had made Wanda Petronsky move away. It sounds like this is like really lingering in her heart, right? She's really thinking a lot about this. But she didn't do that before, right? She's sad, but sometimes it's good to be sad. It's good to be upset, isn't it? Because it means that you're learning and you're growing, right? Well, anyway, said Peggy, she's gone now, so what can we do? Peggy's still, like, not changing in the same way, right? Besides, when I was asking her all about the dresses, she probably was getting good ideas for her drawings. She might not even have won the contest otherwise. She doesn't get it, right? Maddie carefully turned this idea over in her head for if there were anything in it that she would not have to feel so bad. But that night, she couldn't sleep. She thought about Wanda and her faded blue dress and the little house that she had lived in. And she thought about old man Svensson, living a few steps away. And she thought about the glowing picture of those 100 dresses, all lined up in the classroom. At last, Maddie sat up in bed. Here we go. Pressed her forehead, tightened her hands, and really thought. This was the hardest thinking that she had ever done. After a long, long time, she reached an important conclusion. She was never going to stand up and say nothing again. If she ever heard anybody picking on someone because they were funny looking or because they had strange names, she would speak up, even if it meant losing Peggy's friendship. She had no way of making things right with Wanda, but from now on, she would never make anybody else so unhappy again. And finally, all tired out, Maddie fell asleep. And that's where we're going to stop for today. She's really changed, hasn't she? She's really changed. Kind of too late for Wanda, but maybe this is something important for Maddie to go through so that never happens again, right? Remember that word I said to you before, catalyst? That's something that makes something else change. Are you thinking what I'm thinking? I think that Wanda was a catalyst. We never even met Wanda in this book for real, right? But she really had a really big job in this book, making Maddie grow, right? Okay, we're going to finish the book up next time, thinking about the very end. Okay, tune in then. I'll see you then.